What's going on, folks? This is Astroot. So I'm going to review Biggie's second posthumous album, which is called Duets, the Final Chapter. Now, this came out in late 2005, and it's a little bit different from the Born Again posthumous album from 1999, which kind of had a lot more New York boom bap, especially in the singles like Dead Wrong and that type of stuff. And I would have to say that this shows like some mid 2000s contemporary stuff towards it. It really makes you kind of salivate over the idea of seeing Biggie as to what he would have been like as far out as 2005. Just paying attention to how flashy that Diddy was kind of on this project, or Puff Daddy. He was kind of pretty flashy. He showed up on some good songs on here. And it's just kind of underneath the impression as far as wondering what Biggie could have wound up doing. Because he collaborates with some folks on here that were not even around when Biggie was alive. So that's kind of the concept, like Akon, Obi Trice, Korn. I mean, Korn was around when Biggie was around, but Korn is kind of a surprising one. Scarface, some of these ones, Slim Thug, T.I., more Bone Thugs, Twista, those type folks. There's just a number of things on here that kind of happen that are just kind of bewildering to kind of wonder if we would have actually wound up getting like a Biggie collaboration had that happened in his lifetime. And I definitely kind of have to say and stuff that's interesting enough to kind of convey. Now this is a decent album. It's not a classic, but I do feel like it has enough hits on here to warrant like a pretty solid purchase, especially since it's been 17 years. But I would have to say the idea from what I've seen here is the fact that it's really lacking like club songs. I would have to say that it could use another song like Nasty Girl, but it does have some pretty clever moments. We're going to talk about these more in a little bit, but I just would have to kind of say and such that I definitely was drooling over the concept of getting like Biggie on like 2000s type stuff, just because the stuff that they show on here, in some cases, the worst part, maybe not every single time, but a handful of times, the Biggie verse was the part that you're not paying attention to. Because some of these, because Biggie only recorded so much material in his lifetime, the concept behind it kind of is that some of these are just verses that you've already heard already. Like you might catch one from like Nasty Boy, which is from Life After Death. That's the verse that they threw in. Nasty Girl is just from Biggie's Nasty Boy. And then you'll get like one from What's Beef, and you get one from like his verse on you get one from Young G's on Puff Daddy's No Way Out album from 97. So some of these are not quite as secretive as like others, but I do feel like there are some good verses on here. It's just too bad that they are kind of on bad songs. And that's kind of the concept, where I like the concept of Biggie, this being a Biggie tape, but the problem with it kind of is just the fact that in some cases when the wrong verse is kind of on the song, and especially if it's a verse that's been on some of Biggie's more popular songs, it's kind of a waste of like it's Biggie just shouldn't have been on the song. In some cases, it's kind of a bad look for Biggie, just because his verses just don't need to be on the song. But I know because it's his album, because he didn't have that much material, there's not a lot to work with. But that's just kind of the concept. It's really tough to kind of find those, but there are some good ones on here. But it's just, in some cases, I feel like the best moments of the album come from like the verses from the people who are still amongst the living and did some stuff. So that's pretty interesting. But there were two singles off this project, and the first single is Nasty Girl, which has Nasty Girl has Puff Daddy, Nelly, Jagged Edge, and Avery Storm on here in addition to Biggie. And basically, Biggie's verse, like I said, is from Nasty Boy off of his Life After Death album, which basically should have been a single. Nasty Boy I could have definitely seen as like another glitzy, kind of very similar song to Mo Money, Mo Problems, just without the sample. But this one really has like a nice hook from Jagged Edge. It's another example of something that probably would have worked extremely well for Biggie, just to kind of wonder how this sort of flashy stuff would have happened in the mid 2000s, past Puff Daddy and his shiny suit era, kind of more where he was kind of P Diddy and that type stuff, where he was kind of doing the suave, making the band type stuff. So it would have been interesting to see how Biggie would have turned out like 2004, 2005. Definitely made me curious, but it is a pretty glossy song. What's unfortunate is because this is basically, apart from Spit Your Game, this is really like the only true club bop on here. And I feel like Big is just such a master in a lot of ways of doing songs like this. He's such a professional at doing songs like this, especially on songs like Big Papa and Nasty Boy and Mo Money, Mo Problems and Hypnotize and some of those type moments. I just really feel like it's a disappointment that this is the only real song like that. And it's good to see that Puff Daddy was on here. It's just another taste of like the 90s kind of bad boy vibe that him and Biggie had so well. I definitely feel like Puff Daddy probably needed to be on this project way more, but he really wasn't. He's only on here twice. This is kind of the concept there, but it is a nice lit club bop. I mean, Nelly does well with Avery Storm. Jagged Edge delivers a pretty good hook. Pretty much, I would say, almost better than the Nasty Boy song that Biggie got the verse from. And then I would say Puff Daddy was a nice fit. It's a nice glossy vibe for him. But yeah, so the second single was Spit Your Game, and this one did not get the sheer success of Nasty Girl, but it did serve as like a pretty. I definitely feel like Spit Your Game was a pretty great song. I definitely like the charm of this one. Swiss Beats gives a pretty nice beat on here. I definitely would have to say, reminded me of something Don Cannon would do. This one definitely felt like a mixtape type vibe. I almost wonder if Biggie, how he would have turned out if he would have dropped some mixtapes. Definitely gives me that kind of vibe of something ripped right out of 2006 or the fall of 2005, something like that. Those kind of beats that Jeezy and like the USDA group that Jeezy was in would be on, and Fat Joe and Rick Ross and those type people, and DJ Khaled, that type of stuff. That sort of vibe that was kind of from there. It barely made sense that Bone Thugs was on this song. It wasn't really their cup of tea, and it wasn't really Twista's cup of tea either. But they did a good job on there. This definitely reminded me of like some mixtape cut, and it's just interesting to kind of get that. It sounded like a Swiss Beats type beat, but it is an excellent one. I really did enjoy this one. It was just Biggie's verse from Notorious Thugs, which is another highlight from Life After Death. So this is another one. I feel like this quick tempo, it's a little bit quicker than Nasty Girl, but I can see it being played at like a club. I just think it's kind of more, the hook is just, the hook has its bite to it, but I feel like the Nasty Girl hook was probably better. I think this song has a more quick, this song has a quicker beat and it's probably more made for the club, but Nasty Girl is just more emphatic and is more instantly recognizable because of Jagged Edge's great chorus. But this one is still pretty good. This is like the raw street single that I would have to say would happen. So it does work, but it's just not quite as, I can see that it didn't chart as high, but it is a good song. So it's not to discredit it. It's just the fact that it's just a street single, and that's probably how it was, but it is a good song. So the rest of this album, I'm going to go ahead and list the 7 songs I recommend to you out of 17. So they would be Nasty Girl, I'm With Whatever, Hustler's Story, Spit Your Game, Wake Up, It Has Been Said, and Breaking Old Habits. Talk about some of these. It has been said, has Eminem and Obi Trice and Puff Daddy on there. Biggie's not really on this one. I did like it pretty well. Eminem produced the beat on here, and it just reminded me of really like a kind of creepy castle kind of headquarters type feel. It just felt like Eminem was kind of musing in his palace. Just, Eminem probably has a pretty like huge estate just as far as where he lives and stuff, so it just kind of feels like just a king musing in his castle, kind of pissed off at the surroundings and that type of stuff. And Eminem didn't really like the fact that Biggie wasn't here and that type of stuff, and Obi Trice felt like a nice companion piece to the song also. It's pretty good to kind of get more Eminem, Obi Trice type songs. And then Puff Daddy was on here. It's another good song for Puff. He needed to be on more of these. So it just works. I mean, it really has, like I said, this creepy castle kind of headquarters type feel for Eminem. I would have to say yeah, I do think Eminem probably should have given this project at least another beat or two, because just how good this one was. It's a pretty solid one. I mean, this is like Eminem was a pretty solid producer, so it's definitely good to kind of get some of these. But there are some bad beats on here, but this is definitely not one of them. I just feel like this one just really feels like a nice winter kind of creepy, kind of cool, cold outside type feel towards it. Just real chilly, and it's kind of hanging out in your home, just kind of casting the surroundings, watching the news, that type stuff. Like, what are some other ones I liked here? I liked I'm With Whatever. This is a nice one. This one doesn't have Biggie on here either, but it does have Lil Wayne and Joel Santana, and Jim Jones is barely on the song. But considering how popular that Lil Wayne and Joel Santana kind of were, I do feel like this is a nice one to kind of have just because they make some gems. They're definitely mixtape kings and princes and that type stuff. So there's some pretty cold piano beats on here with Hustler's Story with Akon and Scarface and Big Gee. And then I'm with whatever with Lil Wayne and Joel Santana really have some real crisp, chilling kind of piano like beats on there that just really have like a nice creepy kind of cold kind of feeling. And then like another one that does that is kind of breaking old habits. That one kind of reminds me more of like a UGK type feel. I'm surprised that they didn't show up on this project, but I guess like Pimp C was not as big a fan of Biggie or something like that that he was of Tupac. But I did like the kind of Texas kind of New York slash the kind of Texas New York hybrid of breaking old habits. It's good to kind of see Slim Thug and Ti deliver some good verses. But this is what I talk about where I say that the Biggie verse was actually the least thing to pay attention to, just because Ti and Slim Thug turned it into like a nice Southern fried kind of song, just with like a creepy edge to it. It was kind of interesting to get Ti and Slim Thug a little bit out of their element. Akon delivers a pretty rock solid hook on Hustler's story. I definitely love the concept of like an Akon and Biggie song. I really wonder how that would have turned out. I think the closest thing I can think of to how an Akon and Biggie song would have turned out would have been Soul Survivor with Akon and Young Jeezy. I definitely think that that would have been crazy. I know Biggie would have torn that song apart. Probably would have hit #1. Wake Up is a really clever one. It's the concept of hearing like Biggie on a new metal type song with Korn. I definitely feel like this is just like a kind of backyard, kind of woozy, kind of ghoulish with like smoke machines, fog machines on the ground to where you can't even see your feet and that type of stuff. Just kind of soaking up, smoking a little, soaking up like the night sky and just smoking that type of stuff, just enjoying things, and just kind of has that creepy kind of October kind of feel towards it. Definitely like that one. Corn kind of has like a real kind of grim type hook. This is really another one that I would love to see as far as like a collaboration that could have happened, is like Biggie actually doing a song with Korn. I mean, this one doesn't seem as likely, but I think if Biggie had made it to new metal and like especially like alternative metal that Korn later wound up doing, I would definitely love to see how that would have turned out. I think Biggie could have really knocked that one out of the park. Yeah, I think I covered it. So that basically takes care of that. That's the 7 songs I recommend. So the 2 singles plus the 5 other songs, which would be It Has Been Said, It Has Been Said, I'm With Whatever, Hustler's Story, Breaking Old Habits, and Wake Up with Korn. So that's kind of the concept. But to talk about some of these ones that I didn't enjoy, like there's a lot of pretty poor beats on here. Like I really was disappointed with Living the Life with Snoop Dogg and Ludacris on there. I was kind of disappointed with the beat on Living the Life with Snoop Dogg and Ludacris on there. I mean, Biggie had such a terrific verse on that one. It was definitely one I hadn't heard before, but the song, the beat, the kind of twangish guitar, whatever that was on the song, was kind of ruined for it. This is not the type of song I'd like to hear Biggie on. So yeah, there's just some kind of bad beats on here. Like I feel like Get Your Grind On was a close one. That was like a song that could have almost been an almost song, but it kind of had like a depressing New York kind of feel. I did like almost that approach, but the beat probably just could have been like a hair or two better to have been able to do it. I mean, that's another one that kind of felt like a twinkling, where you're looking out the window on a rainy day in like a New York restaurant or something, but it just didn't quite have like the appeal as much as I would have liked it to. And there are some real bad ones on here, like Beef, and the Missy Elliott song's pretty bad. I mean, I don't know what that song was trying to be. If Missy Elliott was trying to give Biggie like a dance beat, that one just didn't work. And I was also disappointed with the Me Casa song with R. Kelly, which, considering that R. Kelly and Biggie did a song previously called Fuck You Tonight, that song completely blows Me Casa out of the water. I mean, that's just kind of the concept, is Me Casa is a pretty terrible rendition as a follow up to another R. Kelly and Biggie song. Hold Your Head was not a good song. This is a popular song on Spotify off the Biggie Duets album, but it's just basically Biggie's verses from Suicidal Thoughts with kind of like a kind of haphazard Bob Marley verse, which is not even that good. I mean, I really felt like Bob Marley probably has way better melodies and verses that they could have grafted to the song as far as trying to get something for Biggie's Suicidal Thoughts. Production just wasn't that good. It was too kind of just didn't follow through the whole way. It was trying to be like a dramatic feel, but it really didn't pull it off that well. And I feel like Just a Memory by Clips was not a good one. There's just a lot of these on here. There's plenty of bad beats on here that just don't really do well. the Mobb Deep song Beef was not good. Living in Pain was kind of a disappointing one. I mean, that had Tupac on there, but I feel like I don't know why Tupac and Biggie couldn't have been on like a Stepping Out song. Especially, when you think of Nas songs, most of the time when Nas lends a feature to someone else, he never pops up on like the contemporary songs. I noticed that Nas is always like on the introspective, kind of thought provoking kind of songs, but it would be nice to hear Nas on like some sort of contemporary kind of nasty girl type song, like on this song. Like Nelly wound up being on the club bop, but it should maybe Nas would be a good one to see how he steps down that kind of thing. But this is kind of the concept. 1970 something, I really wasn't interested in that one. So there's just a lot of these that just have a bad context. To kind of sum up some of these ones I didn't like, it's kind of disappointing because there's just not nearly enough stepping out songs in terms of like how this probably should have went. Like I know Biggie may not have completely I want to say that I know Biggie might not have completely been a stepping out rapper, but I think he did it enough times on Life After Death, his final album. Like when you look after it, Hypnotize, Mo Money, Mo Problems, Fuck You Tonight, Going Back to Cali, Notorious Thugs, and like Nasty Boy, and some of those type songs. I mean, he did have, and even Another. There were just some great ones on here that kind of did have like a outland, just a stepping out kind of feel, and a more contemporary and weekend type feel towards it. But really, this album for the most part only really gets to that with just the two songs, which are Nasty Girl and then Spit Your Game. There's really just not enough moments for that. I feel like this album is trying to be shapely. It does do a clever rendition of at least trying to briefly and mildly kind of ascertain the idea of Biggie being on songs with some of these folks who blossomed in the 2000s, but when they're on bad songs, it kind of defeats the purpose of it. And it kind of, but this album busts its own chops because it puts good rappers on crap songs. Like Ludacris is on a bad song. Fat Joe was kind of on an almost song. The Jay-Z song is not as good as like a typical Jay-Z and Biggie collaboration. The Game was kind of on a weak cut. Tupac and Nas did not really deliver well. Mobb Deep feature was wasted. Missy Elliott was definitely wasted. R. Kelly picked a real bad song to kind of have as like a follow up record with Biggie. And Charlie Wilson, I wonder how that would have turned out. Bob Marley was just not the right vocal clip and verse from him and melody. And it just feels like in the clip. So it's just like a lot of these are just bad collaborations. And they just really either the amalgamation of how it happened just didn't work that well, or it's just the fact that the chemistry was just not there. But I really blame the production more so than the chemistry of the artist, because I think a lot of these folks probably would have worked with Biggie extremely well had he been alive to do it. But it's just more the beat and the topic and like the tempo of the song and the energy of the song is just mixed up and not what it needed to be. There needed to be way more weekend and kind of like take your shirt off, kind of have a good time. There's really not that many ladies songs on here either. There's just no dance cuts minus Nasty Girl, and that's the lady song Nasty Girl. But for the most part, it's just kept to a minimum, and this feels like the topic selection on this album is pretty piss poor. It's just not interesting topics that this album comes up with. So I'm gonna give this album, me liking 7 songs out of 17. I'm going to give this album a 4.5 out of 10. I feel like it's got promise and the singles are good, but the whole concept about it is this is really kind of almost uninteresting just because most of the collaborations are just missed opportunities in a great way. That just really happens to be a thing. So the social score, me giving this album a 4.5 out of 10, I'm going to give the social score like a 4 out of 10. It's not really that good just because I would have to say that there's some good moments on here, but a lot of it is just not meant for. A lot of this is just not meant for hanging out with your friends and kind of being contemporary and enjoying yourself and kind of strutting your stuff and flaunting it and that type stuff. It just doesn't really give off that kind of vibe. I mean, a lot of these, they pick like the more they pick the more gangsta Biggie, kind of where he's more pissed off and kind of flashing his guns and shooting, busting shots Biggie, more so than the kind of suave and kind of play it type Big Papa type Biggie. It just feels like he has a lot more nasty things to say, more so than kind of kicking back and more on the Mo Money, Mo Problems type vibe, which is kind of disappointing because it probably could have stood to have been a little bit more relaxed and just glossy, but it just didn't really do that. So this is kind of the concept. So In terms of the future, this is the most recent Biggie posthumous album apart from the Notorious soundtrack, which I reviewed a couple months ago. But that just kind of serves to be the concept of it. 4.5 out of 10 for social. That should tell you just about it. But I do recommend getting this album just for Nasty Girl and Spit Your Game. But this is kind of, these are just life after death recycled verses. It's mainly the other rappers that you should want. And the Eminem song's pretty good. And there are some other ones on here that really kick ass. So just know that.